Hello, world. Happy Webinar Wednesday. It's Dr. Deborah Thompson from One Health Lessons. And today I have the great honor to introduce you all to Dr. Catarina Lavrador and Dr. Filipe Dias. Dr. Lavrador is in Portugal right now, and Dr. Dias is in Guinea-Bissau. The one thing that those two countries have in common is that there is a lot of Portuguese spoken there. You may have already known that, but just for the benefit of everybody else. Now, if you want to learn more after this great conversation that we will have, please go to the blog page of onehealthlessons.com and you'll see this phenomenal article written by Dr. Diaz about his experience teaching children about One Health in Guinea-Bissau. Well, let's first get started and go through introductions. Dr. Lavrador, let's start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Hello, I am Catarina Lavrador. I'm from Portugal. I'm a veterinarian and I used to work at the University of Évora. Actually, I still belong to the university. I'm just away for 2 years working for the Ministry of Agriculture with Portuguese native breeds right now. So that's what I'm doing.
Oh, fascinating. Wonderful. Thank you.
And you're welcome.
Yes. Could you tell us about your background, please?
Yes, I'm Portuguese and I finished my master degree in veterinary medicine in 2030 at the University of Évora in Portugal. And the area of education has always been an area that fascinated me. So I have always wanted to be a teacher since I was a child. And because of that, I finished a master degree in education in 2016. And during this time, I worked as a veterinarian. I worked too in Mozambique, as a veterinarian for 2 years, during which I organized rabies vaccination campaigns and promote some radio and TV programs in the field of public health and One Health. And currently, I am in Guinea-Bissau and I work as a cooperation agent in an NGO. My work right now is in the area of education, namely in the training of teachers. And I finished this year my PhD in education, in which my research work focuses on the paradigm One World, One Health, and the importance of developing intercultural competences during the veterinary medicine training in order to prepare veterinary professionals to act in the global world. So this is my story with veterinary and education and with Africa and Portugal.
Wow, I love that. And for the benefit of all the listeners, if you missed last week's Webinar Wednesday event, we were talking with Amy Bond from UC Davis, University of California at Davis, and Gorilla Doctors, and we were talking about science communication. So it sounds like there's a lot of great overlap between today's conversation and last week's conversation. And I would love another time to talk with Dr. Diaz and everybody about how to get the message of public health and health literacy and education out to the masses via television and radio, through media. So that is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Going back to Dr. Lavrador. Now, the way we know each other is through the One Hope Initiative. And for the benefit of everybody, the One Hope Initiative, and you are welcome to join it, is the International One Health for One Planet Education Initiative. There are people around the world focused on bringing One Health into schools at so many different levels, grade schools and universities, and there are also other components like policy in there too. I'll invite Dr. Lavrador to speak more about her experience in One Hope and see how that led into your collaboration with Dr. Diaz.
Oh, well, my collaboration with One Hope is recent. I would say about 1.5 years. I just found out by accident because I was looking on the internet about One Health matters of education. And then I found out about One Hope and got in touch with George Lupeke. I think that's the way you pronounce his last name. And he was of course, very nice, and suggested I could join One Hope and having the role of facilitator for education, for primary and secondary education in Portugal. And I thought that would be fascinating. It's not very, very easy. I don't know about what is your experience in the US to get into schools. Here in Portugal, sometimes people are not as open as we would expect them to be. It's hard to get into schools. Either you know someone or you have lots of sort of obstacles on the way. But now it has started. I've started last week in my youngest daughter's school, teaching about One Health, and it went well for 7th graders. And next week I'll start in 4 or 5 schools south of Lisbon in a peninsula called Setúbal. So let's see
That is wonderful. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. That means that you are well on your way to becoming a One Health Lessons ambassador. Just for the benefit of all viewers, and you can see the information on onehealthlessons.com. But the One Health Lessons Ambassadors program is for people who are already certified lesson leaders. They have to teach 5 times in their own local community in their own first language. And then once you have shown that you have taught at least 5 times in these different classrooms, then you can become promoted to One Health Lessons Ambassador, and therefore you get in this growing network of people around the world who are like-minded. So that is wonderful to hear, Dr.
Let me just interrupt just to tell you that and tell everyone that all materials you have online on the One Health Lessons website, they're wonderful. Actually, those are the ones we have adapted for Guinea-Bissau, but Filipe will talk more about that.
That is, thank you. And I did not put her up to this, everybody. This was completely a surprise. So thank
Spontaneous. Yeah, it was.
Thank you, Dr. Lavrador. I appreciate that. So we know each other through the One Hope initiative, which is wonderful. So I'm in North America, you're in Portugal, so Europe, of course. But then we're bringing in Africa. So can you explain how you know Dr. Dias? Can you explain how you thought to get even more people involved in the global One Health education movement?
Sure. So Filipe was a former student back in University of Évora, and he was not only a wonderful student, a wonderful clinician, and he was interested in education. So I knew he was in Guinea, working mainly in the educational area. So I've contacted him, and basically not only to propose him to join this project through One Hope and One Health Lessons at the same time, and ask him something that I was afraid was a reality, that Guinea-Bissau has severe public health issues. So this could be a very wonderful and pertinent opportunity. And he was immediately very enthusiastic. So we tried to put everything together, and I think it worked well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Lavrador. And Dr. Dias, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in Guinea-Bissau? What was it like to bring One Health Lessons into classrooms there?
Yes, well, working in Guinea-Bissau in the area of education and having the opportunity in recent years to run a school in a small town in southern Guinea-Bissau called Buba, this facilitates the opportunity to develop the team of One Health with these children. And I think this coronavirus pandemic has increased the need to include this topic in schools. So in addition, together with the challenge launched by Professor Catarina, who told me about One Health Lessons materials, created the necessary motivation to move forward with this project and our school in Buba.
That's wonderful. And just a side note, I remember the very first conversation that I've had one-on-one with Dr. Lavrador, and we were brainstorming because Dr. Lavrador was saying that it is hard to get into classrooms. And we were thinking about, okay, well, maybe the best way is to go through the Ministry of Education. And do you remember what I said?
I do. I
Yeah.
always have that in mind. I always keep that in mind because it's so simple and yet so important to go through that path instead of going up, starting by the bottom. It was genius, I have to say.
Please share with the audience, because I don't think that they know what we're talking about.
So my idea was to contact the Minister of Education and proposing this project, and sort of then like an octopus going into every school in Portugal, and maybe a very ambitious thing that was insert One Health topic into the school programs. And then I talked with Dr. Deborah Thompson, and she said, well, maybe that's not the right way to go. You should start in some school where you know someone and where you have direct access. And then with that and everything, if everything goes well, you have enough evidence to say this was a success. We can replicate this in other schools. This worked well. It's relatively easy to put together. So let's go, let's work. And so that's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, it's funny because it was, so we now have 3 sort of projects with this common thing called One Health Lessons and One Hope, one in Guinea, one in Lisbon that I did last week, and one in the southern part of Lisbon called Setúbal. And 2 of them were with the help of 2 former students. So this gives me, it's a very pleasant thing.
I love
gives
that.
me hope. So yeah.
I love that. So you hear that, all professors out there listening? It's time to leverage your wonderful graduate students who you know have the potential to go far into the communities and make a big difference, like Dr. Diaz. So going back to Dr. Diaz, how were these lessons received in Guinea-Bissau?
The lessons were very well received by both students and teachers. After the materials arrived at the school, I trained the teachers on how to use these materials in their classes. A teacher from each class discussed the topic with the children, and they loved it. Firstly, because it was an opportunity to everyone to get in touch with materials they had never had contact with before, such as the mega flashcards we produce. Because the topic generated great interest because of the way it was explained, using many images and practical examples familiar to everyone. At the end, everyone wanted to take a picture holding flashcards. And I would like to share some pictures. Is it possible?
Oh my goodness, yes, please.
Okay.
Let's see. I just made you host.
Okay.
So you can share your screen. And what is the age of these students? How old?
It's between first grade and 6th grade.
Oh my goodness.
So between 6 year and 12 year, 13 year, 14 year.
Incredible.
You see my
your screen.
My screen. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So here we have some pictures of the children with flashcards. These pictures are from the 5th and 6th grade. And in the next, here we have the primary school grades. In the second picture, we see the children drawing the 3 circles that represent the One Health concept.
Wow.
And the last one, here we have the 4th grade and some drawing on the board that represents the Venn diagram of the One Health concept. So I think I want to share with you.
Oh, this is incredible. I love the bird. Or is that a bat? Yes, maybe a bird and a pig.
Yes.
I mean, the children do not draw better than me, and I don't draw better than them. So that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Okay.
Wonderful. So wow. So do you have any particular advice for people who want to do what you've done? How can you what words of wisdom do you have to motivate others to bring
Mhm.
classes, One Health into classes?
Well, I think the most important thing is already being done, which is to understand that it will be through education that we will be able to live truly included in the One Health concept. I think in the past, this concept seemed to be very restricted to the professions involved in it, but now there is greater effort to make this concept known to everyone, starting at the school with children. This is perhaps the most important message to leave. There is still a long way to go, I think, but I usually give a practical example to my students. Bringing together professionals from animal health and human health and environmental health, it sounds to be easy. But the problem, I think, is to bring together the global policymakers, since we depend on them for the concept to be truly applied on a global scale. And I think that this is where education has an important role to educate current generations, so that in the future there are global changes.
Yes, I agree completely. I think that, well, number one, if you're teaching children, they will grow up and become politicians, teachers, parents, who will then not only have a One Health mindset themselves, they will
Mhm.
encourage the next generation after them to have one. So that is incredibly important. The other
Yes.
thing that I think is important is, from what you just said, is if you can educate a child about One Health, then you can educate others. You can educate policymakers. But the best trial to see if your messaging is landing the right way is to speak with children. And not a shameless plug, but a shameless plug. The book that I wrote, The Art of Science Communication, Sharing Science with Students, the public, and policymakers, it goes over methods and techniques of how to share science, complicated science, with stakeholders who are not in the science field. Yes, I absolutely agree with everything that you just said. So, did you get particular feedback from the teachers? Do they want to continue teaching One Health, or what was their
Yeah.
thought?
Yes, of course I do. Our idea at the school is to apply new materials every year to future classes, which we can develop it and improve, as well as create new materials. It would also be great to promote them in other schools in the region and even in other schools across the country. We are working on it, and I think it could be a short-term reality.
I think that is incredible. Thank you so much for doing what you do, being who you are. You have made such a difference in your community. And I hope that all the listeners out there can see that this just started with a simple conversation between, Dr. Lavrador and myself. And then Dr. Lavrador had the foresight to be like, oh, Dr. Diaz would be perfect for this. And so therefore, with that one conversation, we have two different countries involved in One Health education. I'm so inspired
Actually,
by
three with you.
three with me.
Let,
Yeah.
Let me just jump in just to share a funny story, because we have adapted the One Health lesson about COVID-19, the Portuguese translation of it. And then I send it to Filipe, and there's one of the slides has some fruits on it. It's a strawberry and then a pear, and the other one I can't remember. And then Filipe said, well, a strawberry, it's not a good idea. They have no idea what it is. So we switched and put a banana, a double banana, a banana with a mutation. And so and so we went with the banana
I think that's
to
perfect.
make it locally adapted.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. That was brilliant. Thanks for doing that, Filipe. I've heard in other areas of Africa that was needed as well. So really appreciate that. And what you just said was hitting on the most important point of science communication. Know your audience, right? Know your audience. And Dr. Diaz lives in Guinea-Bissau, so he clearly knows the community and the needs there. And Dr. Lavrador lives in Portugal, and she certainly knows the needs there. I think that's incredible. Any last words of wisdom for young and even older One Health advocates around the world who are listening today?
I don't know about Filipe, but maybe a word of advice. Don't give up and follow your suggestions. Start by the bottom and don't be too ambitious. That was a key point.
Well, it's more like leveraging the evidence that you have. So at the time that you go to the policymakers, you can say, look, it already works. Yep. So with time,
That's right.
Yep. With time, you will be speaking with the policymakers, but it's a good idea that you have the evidence to support your message. Yep. And Dr.
Yes.
Diaz,
That's
do
right.
you have any words of advice for future or current One Health advocates around the world who want to do what you have done?
I think the most important is to start. And when you start, you forward with this idea, and everything is okay.
Perfect.
But it's a challenge, of course, but it's good for this.
Yep. What's the saying? Anything that's worth doing, anything that's hard to do is worth doing, something like that. Well, there you have it, everybody. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Dr. Diaz. Thank you so much, Dr. Lavrador, for this wonderful conversation. I'm
Thank
sure.
you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure
This was
you've
wonderful.
Thank you.
And
I'm sure
thank you for what you do, because it really makes a difference.
I appreciate that. I'm sure you both have inspired many people listening today. Onwards and upwards, everybody. I'll see you next week.